Hi everyone, and welcome to D&D Horror Stories with D&D Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a couple trying to force a new player into a threesome in a game of Dungeons & Dragons. A story about a dungeon master that discovers that one of his players hacked his game notes, and more. But before we get into those, here are some kitties to help boost our protection against the psychic damage that these stories are sure to inflict. There we go. Now I think we are ready for some D&D horror stories. It's supposed to be a triangle. By Reddit user, Striking Station 4360. I honestly don't even know where to start. This is so crazy, and I still haven't fully processed it, but I'll give it a shot. Sorry in advance. This is gonna be a long post. I've been playing tabletop RPGs and being a game master for as long as I can remember. It's my favorite hobby, so yeah, it's fun. Recently, my last campaign wrapped up as a DM, and due to scheduling, the horror, my friend group won't be able to play again until at least next year, which is fine. Life happens. It sucks, but it is what it is. So I looked online to see if anything interesting was out there. I ended up finding a group on a Discord server with an open spot in a campaign that was starting soon. Since it had been a while since I'd just played, I figured I'd give it a shot. The group had 6 players and a DM, 7 in total, which felt like a lot to me. But hey, if the DM can handle it, who am I to judge? It was supposed to be a shorter campaign, with multiple sessions a week. They wanted 3 or 4. Since the timing was mostly in the evenings, when I'm free, I figured why not. The DM did not have a session 0, which I think is a mistake, but oh well. I didn't say anything at the time. We each came up with our characters. I wanted to play a more laid-back character, so I came up with Craig, a barbarian from the northern tribes, kicked out of his tribe after coming of age, as the chief didn't want any competition for the chief spot. Simple, just a human barbarian. The rest of the party wasn't anything too wild either. We had a cleric, a warlock, a bard, a ranger, and a rogue. Session day came, and we started playing. The premise was straightforward. A gold reward offered for anyone who could find a family heirloom in a family crypt. A dungeon crawl, as you would expect, and a pretty big one. Exploring the dungeon was fun, and it gave us a chance for roleplay and all that. Everything was going fine. We ended the session with the party setting up camp right before a long rest. That's when things got weird. Out of nowhere, the warlock blurts out, "Me and the cleric will share a tent with Craig." It seemed harmless, and I wasn't fully thinking, so I just said, "Craig's gonna sleep on a bedroll on the floor. No tent." I didn't see the player's face, but I heard a sigh over the mic. Nothing too strange, right? That's what I thought at first. Our next session was 2 days later. We got together and continued the dungeon crawl. Throughout the session, the warlock and cleric had some, well, weird roleplay. It seemed like they were supposed to be some kind of couple, but honestly, I've seen people use tabletop RPGs to act out stranger things, so I didn't mind. The session ended after we found the heirloom, a necklace, and returned it to the owner. We then went to find a place to stay at an inn in the village. The first thing the cleric says is, "We can rent 3 rooms, 1 for the rogue, 1 for the ranger, and Craig, the warlock, and I can share one." I don't know why, but it just bothered me when they said that. So I responded, "He's gonna sleep in the stables. He's not comfortable with fancy beds." And once again, I got what sounded like a sigh over the mic. The next session was 2 days later again. First was Monday, the second was Wednesday, and this one was Friday. We got together, and right after the DM's recap, the Warlock goes, "I think the cleric and I sneaked out in the evening to find Craig in the stables," with this little strange laugh. Honestly, it had been a rough day at work, so I just said, "Why? He doesn't want company other than the horses. Seriously, this makes no sense." And maybe my tone wasn't the friendliest, but wow, did that strike a nerve. Both the cleric and the warlock started complaining loudly, overlapping on their mics so much that I could barely hear them. The one thing I did catch was, "It's supposed to be a love triangle. What aren't you getting about this?" The moment I heard that, alarms went off in my head. I was instantly like, I did not agree to that. What the hell are you trying to pull? Things escalated from there. Apparently, they had this whole story in their heads where there would be a love triangle between their characters and Craig. Like, dude, no. I don't play tabletop RPGs for that. Obviously not. Things got really weird. They started saying a lot about what they wanted in the story that I'm definitely not going to write out here. Long story short, these two had some fantasy about being in a 3-person relationship and thought it was a great idea to push that onto someone they didn't even know in an online D&D game. I didn't stick around much longer. I left the channel, but had to block them because they started direct messaging me. I told the DM I was dropping the table, and he was super apologetic about it. As it turns out, these two were his in-real-life friends. But seriously, what the hell? Can't we just play D&D in peace? Let me smash the damn goblins. TLDR. A couple tried to force my character into a love triangle, and they got super mad when I didn't go along with it. Well, that is a pretty weird thing to try and push onto a new D&D player in your group that you don't even know. That dungeon master probably should have had a session 0 in order to avoid things like this and let the players say what they want and don't want from the game. Heck, even without a session 0, those other players could have approached OP above table and asked them if they were okay with that type of thing. But to get mad when OP didn't respond to their advances and basically yell at OP is a bit much, and OP probably made the right decision to leave that game afterwards, as that kind of stupid animosity would likely carry on throughout the campaign. This couple likely just wanted to do a threesome in real life, and was using the game to test the waters, so to speak. But doing so with an unwilling and unwitting player was not the way to go. Hopefully, OP was able to find another group to play with in order to get their D&D fix in while their normal group is taking a hiatus. Let's move on to the next post. A player was sneaking into my notes and changing things to make himself come out looking, quote, better. By Reddit user, Zealous Joke. This is messed up. Really, it's so messed up. I've been a DM for as long as I can remember, and I love playing tabletop RPGs. I've been friends with this group for, gods, who even knows how long. Decades at least. We usually play D&D together. It's my go-to group. It's a bigger group than recommended, 7 players total. But since we've been playing together for so long, it actually runs pretty smoothly. When we first started, we didn't have nearly as much content as we do now, so back then, I created a homebrew world. It's been growing and evolving over at least 2 decades now. It's my project, and I take a lot of pride in it. I'm not saying it's the best, but it's the best I could do. I've kept tons of notebooks over the years to keep everything consistent, but in the last year or two, the sheer number of them got, well, pretty cluttered. So I finally decided to organize everything digitally. I started using Notion. Sorry if I'm not supposed to name it. It's a bit clunky at first, but once it's all set up, it's amazing. I can't believe I didn't switch to it sooner. Anyway, that's not the main point of the story. I use Notion for everything: world building, session notes, campaign plots, archives. It does wonders. It makes my life easier, and I can access it from pretty much anywhere. Now onto the real story. About 3 months ago, our group hit some major scheduling issues, and we couldn't play for a while. We went nearly 2 months without a session. The thing is, the break happened after I'd already written up the notes for our next session. Nothing new there, right? Scheduling issues are the bane of tabletop RPGs. But about a month ago, we finally managed to set up a session, so I went back to my notes to refresh my memory, and that's when things felt off. Some things weren't exactly how I remembered them. Bullet points, loot lists, NPC interactions, etc. Even the way it was written, it all seemed a little different. It wasn't that different from what I remembered, but just different enough to feel off. I figured it was just my mind playing tricks on me and ignored it. I made a few tweaks I thought needed more attention, and that was that. 2 weeks later, we had our session coming up, so I went back to my notes to check everything, get the minis ready, the maps, etc. And once again, things were different. Stuff I knew I'd changed had reverted back. Let me paint a picture. The changes all lean towards certain outcomes. I don't usually set things up like that, so it felt wrong, and I made all my changes again. When we finally met for the session at a friend's place, things went smoothly for the most part, but a few things caught my attention. One player, who's normally the most outgoing, was acting a bit strange. You know when someone seems anxious or expectant, like they're waiting for something specific to happen? It was like that. He didn't say anything, but I got the feeling he was expecting something particular to happen, and when it didn't, or didn't happen the way he wanted, he looked frustrated. I thought it was strange, but honestly, everyone's under different kinds of stress, so I didn't dwell on it. I went home that day and got on Notion to write up what happened in the session for my archives. The next day at work, I pulled out my phone to check a few things, as my mind wanders sometimes. I opened the archive for that session, and it was altered again. That's when I was sure something was up. I asked a friend who works in programming if there was any way things could change on Notion by themselves. Maybe their servers were acting up or something. He took my laptop, and the first thing he checked was the list of devices with access to my account. There were 4: my laptop, my phone, my tablet, and another laptop that I didn't recognize, which had logged in that day. As you can imagine, that was absolutely terrifying. I don't want anything on my Notion exposed. It's my work, and I don't want anyone else looking at it. So we did a full reset, changed my passwords and everything. My friend even went the extra mile and reformatted my laptop and reset all of my devices, which sucks. But hey, security first. Well, there wasn't much more we could do after that. My next D&D session was coming up, so I went to work on it. That's when, out of nowhere, I remembered that player's odd behavior. It bugged me, so I decided to check my archives, my world notes, everything. And holy hell, it was everywhere. Everywhere I looked, things were changed to make his characters, yes plural, look better. He'd even edited full-on epilogues, calling his characters the, quote, party's brain and leader, and so on. I was furious. Still am. Our next session was supposed to be this Saturday, but I just couldn't go through with it. I called him and laid it all out and told him I knew what he'd been doing. And you know what this sociopath said? "Why does it even matter? It's not like it's hurting anyone. I just wanted better light." Are you kidding me? I've known him for over 20 years. 20 years. And this guy pulls something like that? I'm sorry, but I'm just so damn angry. I hung up the call the moment he said that, and made sure to kick him out of every tabletop RPG group we have. I told every player what he'd been up to, and they're all just as pissed as I am. Maybe even more, honestly. Now, I'm trying to put things back together and fix everything. Thank God I have my notebooks, so I can fact check it all. But seriously, who does that kind of crap? TLDR, a player I've known for 20 years was hacking into my notes, changing past campaign details and current session notes to make his characters look, quote, better, and didn't even care when he got caught. Holy crap, the gall of some people. This dude seriously broke the trust of his DM and his group just to make his characters look better? That is a really stupid reason to do something like that, and I don't blame OP for giving this dude the boot, especially after he did not seem to have any remorse over it. Though it makes me wonder how he got access to OP's notes in the first place. Perhaps he put a keylogger onto OP's laptop when he wasn't looking, or just peeked over OP's shoulder as OP was logging into his notes. Either way, that is a really messed up thing to do. And what does he get for it? No more D&D and losing a friend of 20 years. Talk about being freaking stupid. Let's move on to the next post. Bad DM, Good DM by Reddit user Doubting Whale. So, after taking a little break from 5th edition around 2017, as I finished university, moved away from friends, etc., a couple years ago, I wanted back in. I didn't have any mates who played, but there was a game held nearby. $10 entry to cover the venue, 2 tables, pretty standard. They played 2 games per night, one from 6 to 9, the other from 9 to 12. I came once to both games and found that the earlier DM was a guy barely 18 years old. Let's call him J. The later DM was phenomenal. Let's call him T. J would finish DMing and play at T's table after. Now, I pretty quickly realized I didn't want to be playing at J's table. He was young and inexperienced, sure, but he was also just weird. Many of his NPC descriptions centered around their relative attractiveness, especially the big old milkers, which all women and certain men in his game had. At one point, he thought I wasn't quite engaging enough with his descriptions of mommy milkers, so he pulled out his phone and very quickly, like as if it was ready to go and he didn't have to search for it, showed me some barely not porn image of a cartoon woman in pink leather. This came to a head when, in my 3rd game with Jay, he used power word kill on another guy's player character from a lich with huge tatas, just to resurrect him and say he killed him for being a perv, and now he would serve her forever. The guy playing the zombie player character loved it. Then they roleplayed this dommy-slave relationship that made me need to vomit. I vowed to never again come for the 6 to 9 game, which sucked because I am not a night owl, and T's games take it out of me. T, on the other hand, was amazing. His world was interactive, his NPCs were believable, and had normal-sized boobs. His descriptions evocative, and I still rate him as one of the top 5 blokes I've ever seen DM. He juggled player characters of multiple different levels seamlessly, and no encounters felt wasted. Now, the next session, when I turned up at 8:30 instead of 6, I could see Jay was pissed. His table now had 2 people. T's later table already had the 6 of us lined up. My level 3 character was the lowest leveled in the game. Jay's was of a level unknown, presumably 15 plus. I think they were a wizard of some variety, but at the time, didn't have enough knowledge of the game to tell you. Now, during a roleplay encounter that T had clearly made just for me, Jay started acting up. He counterspelled all of my minor illusions that I was trying to use to trick this guy, so I lost all my money. And he made sure his character was goading mine the whole time. I found it strange, but laughed it off. Then, while everyone was sleeping, I wanted to steal the money back. Apparently, however, Jay's character doesn't sleep, and rolled a perception check that T didn't ask for, that was higher than my stealth, and exposed me as a thief. I laughed this time too, completely unsure of how to proceed. I noticed T, who had a killer poker face as a DM, was a little pissed. Later, at the next game day, there was an ambush. It was somehow connected to Jay's backstory, but pretty quickly, Jay realized it was just T coming for him in-game. T made up some crap, killed Jay's character with a disintegrate spell, and quite politely told him to make a replacement character that works well in a group. Then my player character snorted his ashes. T, if you're out there, thanks mate. Sorry I moved cities, but you're still on my best DMs ever list. Well, that certainly was a strange ride. First, with the night's first DM making all of the characters overly sexualized with oversized breasts, and even some of the men apparently, and then making a dom-sub relationship with one of the players. I don't blame OP for not going back to that. But second, having that first DM being a player in T's game, only to seemingly retaliate against OP for them leaving his game. I can see how this could annoy T, especially during a scene specifically made for OP. And I can understand pulling a rocks fall onto Jay's character moment. But I do have to say that T should have put a stop to some of what Jay was doing, especially when making rolls that T did not ask for. Then T could just talk to Jay above table. Though for all we know, T already tried talking to Jay before, and it wouldn't stick. Either way, at least it sounded like OP had fun overall, and really liked T as a dungeon master. Now, was the snorting of Jay's character's ashes a bit weird? Sure, but to each their own. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.